Here you have king 10 suited. I like to open it up from early position, which is fine. Big blind calls. You say the big blind is a little bit of a calling station, you think. I mean, I'm usually not reading into stats too much unless you have a lot of stats on your opponent, but, whatever, sure. So flop comes 9-9-7, and I would continuation bet this basically every time. You don't really have great showdown value, and also if you bet and get raised, you can still call. So I think this is a spot where you can probably get away with betting pretty frequently when you raise under the gun. While your opponent does have more nines in your range, you have at least some of them, right? Like ace 9 suited, king 9 suited, queen 9 suited, maybe. Jack 9 suited, maybe. 10-9 suited, 9-8 suited, right? So you certainly have some nines. So you are somewhat well protected here. It's not like the board is 9-7-7 where you have almost no sevens. So I think you can bet, and then if you get raised, it's fine. You just call, maybe even re-raise. You let it go check, though, and I think my plan with this hand, like king 10 suited, and also the weaker spades, like queen jack suited, jack 10 suited, etc., is to bet the flop and then just end up triple barreling. Because if you think about it, you don't really have very many obvious triple barrels in this spot, besides exactly non-ace high flush draws. So I think this is a scenario where you probably just want to go for it. But check's fine. You know you're going to call any turn bet, and if your opponent checks the turn, you'll probably start bluffing then. The problem, though, with checking the flop is that the turn will often bring a card that gives your opponent some equity or gives your opponent a made hand, in which case they're not going to fold. So that means if you do bet the turn, you need to be prepared to bet the river, and I think that's probably the best play in this scenario is to go for a turn bet. If the opponent does bet turn, though, I would just call because then they have lots and lots of nuts in their range. So your opponent checks turn, you do go for the bet, which I think is fine. And your opponent now raises, which is certainly annoying. Your opponent can definitely have nines. You got to think they'd bet a lot of their 9x on the turn, but everyone will not necessarily do that. Your opponent could obviously have straights. They could just have some bluffs. It's always annoying when your opponent has like ace 8 because I don't think your plan is to bluff the river now. I think the plan is to just call and try to get there. Notice we're getting very good pot odds. We need to get there 27% of the time. And you have to think any spade is good and any 8 is good. Every once in a while, a spade's not going to be good. Like, say, opponent has king 10. I'm sorry, king 9, right? I'm sorry, what am I saying? If the opponent has... If you get a spade, like let's say the 5 of spades and the opponent has 9-5. There you go, I found it. Every once in a while, your spade is not good, but for the most part, your spade's going to be good. I guess you're dead every once in a while, but a lot of people won't even check raise the turn with the boat. So I think you have to call. I would not re-raise here, because if you re-raise, you're always getting called by a 9. And, I mean, while you may make a draw like exactly ace-8 to fold, for the most part, I think you'd rather call. Now, if you know your opponent's check-raising range is very, very wide, like they'll just check-raise all sorts of stuff like jack 10, queen jack, ace 3 of diamonds, just like a bunch of nonsense, then you definitely want to jam. And I think if my draw was slightly weaker, like jack 10 suited or queen 10 suited... Even then, maybe not queen 10 suited, but I think like jack 10 suited or 5-4 suited, like spades, I mean. If you have the spades in these scenarios, I probably would go for the jam every once in a while, but that just may be totally unnecessary. If you think your opponent's range is kind of straightforward, right? If it's just straightforward, it's going to be a whole lot of 9s. You do call, get the 8, opponent jams, easy call. Now, I mean, yeah, you do lose to some full houses, and obviously lots of full houses are available. But your opponent's going to have random bluffs. Your opponent may overvalue a 9. Your opponent could also have the straight with like ace 10 or something. So you just have to call here. And you were against the 9 too, so it worked out about as well as it possibly could for you. That said, I think I would probably just bet the flop here. And if you do get raised, you can call and try to get there on the turn. If you did get check raised on the flop and you called and your opponent went all in on the turn, you would have had to reluctantly fold, which is always annoying. But that's not going to happen all that often. I think if you are concerned with sidestepping that rare case, you're just going to end up losing a lot of pots where, say your opponent does have like 6-4. They would have just check folded the flop. Instead, they end up getting the 6 on the turn, and they're going to win sometimes, right? Also, sometimes they bluff you on the turn in the river and you lose. So I think you probably just want to be betting this hand and betting most of your spades and backdoor club draws, and then checking back the flop with more like marginal made hands like ace high, like pocket 8s, etc., and trying to see a cheaper showdown with those. That said, your line is also fine. I don't hate it. The time I would really not want to bet the flop is when I expected my opponent to check raise a lot, because you don't really want to get check raised. But if you tell me your opponent's sticky, meaning they're just going to call a lot, That's not really all that bad when you have a hand that has lots of equity with overcards, flush draw, and you may even be able to triple barrel it by the river. So against someone who's generally call happy, kind of straightforward, I'd be more inclined to just bet the flop.